technology. And it is not lack of financing. What we need is a short-term roadmap. And we need far more and bigger tenders right now. And also, as you have heard, I'm sure many times before, faster permitting. For Europe to meet its renewable energy targets in 2030 and beyond, bold and firm decisions must be taken. And speaking of courage and boldness, I have to say that I do believe, and we believe in Ørsted, that it was indeed a very bold decision by Poland to move to renewable energy and to increase the targets for the power sector from nearly 40% to 50% by 2040. It is undoubtedly the right and necessary decision for many reasons. But I am, of course, also aware that Poland has a very long coal mining legacy and that tens of thousands of jobs in coal mining are on the line. And therefore, I have sincere, deep respect for the decision to bet on renewable and also to create a framework that attracts the needed investments. The transition to green energy should be just and it should be fair, meaning that we must create new opportunities for the mining regions, the miners, which have carried the Polish energy industry for so many decades. And obviously, as I talked about in the beginning, as I'm sure will be very evident from the conversations today and also the coming days, the world, of course, dramatically changed when Russia invaded Ukraine. And we all operate in a different macroeconomic and geopolitical environment today compared to what we did only 4 months ago. And it is, I believe, important that regulators are aware of this to avoid that the green transition loses momentum. Keeping these new circumstances in mind will be key also for Poland's fast build-out of homegrown new power capacity. I would like to address one more thing that I believe is on everybody's mind across the offshore wind industry in Europe right now. And that is the financial struggles that the supply chain is experiencing. We in Ørsted have pushed very hard for decades to bring down the cost of the supply chain together with our peers in the industry. And you also, I'm sure, know these facts, but the cost has come down by 65% in the last 10 years. So I'm proud to say that this has worked. But it also needs to be said loud and clear that right now, across Europe, LCOE is going up for offshore wind. It is going up. I was in Bilbao together with Giles and many other good people some months ago. And I have been doing offshore wind for 10 years. And that was the first time where I heard personally that everyone, almost everyone in that room spoke with one unanimous voice. Developers, suppliers, everyone. And I had never seen that before. And I was in Norway last week, where I was super fortunate to spend some time also with the CEOs of Vestas and GE, to name a few examples. And they were saying the same things, even more forcefully, now 3 months later. And that is that we are now at a point where there is a real risk that the supply chain will be unable to make the huge investments that are needed to deliver the big volumes that we all want. That needs to be recognized. Because it is really a paradox. The outlook has never been brighter for this industry. But instead of planning new factories and how to scale as fast as at all possible, suppliers are now squeezed by inflation, commodity prices, shipping costs, and in some countries, also an auction design that requires developers to make big upfront payments, which will have to be carried also by the supply chain. New seabed permits should be granted based on transparent criteria that support a build-out of renewable energy in harmony with people and the environment. not just by price. In our view in Ørsted, these criteria could, for instance, be, and that has also been said before, reducing the supply chain carbon emissions, green steel, ensuring coexistence with other users, biodiversity impacts, tax transparency, supporting just transition efforts, and then very much local community development. And then, probably more relevant in other markets right now, system integration. So let me leave you with a final word on courage, and I will genuinely try not to sound too self-serving here. This is a very humble comment. But I am proud to say that I have the privilege of representing a company that took a rather bold decision 15 years ago to transform itself from a Danish national utility that was emitting more than a third of the CO2 of Denmark into the global leader of renewable energy. And today, standing here, it is sometimes easy to forget the doubts and the struggle we had on the way. And we are ready, very ready, to share these experiences and also help Poland to do the same in close cooperation with our Polish partners. I'm responsible for our European business, but there is no doubt right now, and the team can support that there is no country where I spend more time than in Poland. And that is because we in Ørsted genuinely believe in the huge potential here. So while everyone in this room, we are of course here to compete. And we are here to win. And we are here to try to get what we believe is ours. That's the rule of business. But we are also here, I believe, on a greater mission that keeps me highly motivated every single day. And that is to pursue together the vision of a world that runs entirely on green energy. And I know that is, of course, extremely ambitious. But there really is no alternative. We simply have to get to a place where we can power our homes, our cars, our planes, our ships, our heavy industry with freedom energy, which doesn't cause climate change and global warming. So when I drove from Warsaw to Seroc this morning, I imagined the day when we and our Polish partners can start producing offshore wind power for the first time here in Poland. I've seen that one time before in another country, and that's a pretty big deal. It will be a landmark moment, and I'm really proud and humbled to just take a small part in that journey. Thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all a wonderful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Rasmussen. Trochę jeszcze pozazdrościłem.
Thank you. I envy you that you took so much time here, but I wanted to add something. That's why I'm here again. First of all, we have prepared for these 3 days an excellent number of panels and workshops. We are all warmly invited to. Today, we are strongly focusing on green hydrogen. So we have 2 strong panels on green hydrogen for the first time in Seroc. They will take up most of the first day. You're all warmly invited to the roundtable workshop devoted to Polish-Ukrainian business cooperation at 4 o'clock, run by moderators from Poland and Ukraine together. In the evening, we'll have an excellent concert of an excellent singer from Ukraine and the Polish celebrity. Maybe not all of you know him if you're from abroad, but I'm sure you'll enjoy and be impressed by his gig. Today we have onshore and offshore sessions, workshops. On the 3rd day, something new, and international supply days for offshore.
Będą warsztaty
And there will also be
na
workshops
wiele tematów, które możecie
on
Państwo
various
przeczytać
topics.
w
Obviously, you can read
programie.
about it in your packs.
Ten cały program, ta cała
The
konferencja
whole
nie odbyłaby
agenda,
się
the whole
bez
conference wouldn't be
Państwa.
taking place without your
Szczególnie
support.
chciałem
I would like to
podziękować
especially
ambasadorom
thank
tego
ambassadors
wydarzenia,
of this event.
Firmie
Vestas,
firmie
Respect Energy, and Ocean Wind. They're our main ambassadors of the conference in Saratsk, as well as our strategic partners, PGE Group and Orlen Group. Thank you so much. Thanks to your funds, owing to you, we have resources to operate, we have funds for the campaign, and we'll be pushing forward. Thank you so much.
Dziękuję, Janusz.
Thank you, Janusz.
No to nic nie zostało
Without
nam
any further
tylko
ado,
zacząć pierwszy panel.
let's
Nasza
begin our
firma
first
ma
panel,
przyszłość, aby
our plan in the
bezpieczeństwo
future
energetyczne.
and
Przedstawię
energy
moich
security,
gości od razu i
opportunities and
zaproszę
chances.
na
I'll
scenę
invite the guest, Ruslana,
zwyciężczyni 40.
the winner of the
konkursu
49th
Eurowizji,
Eurovision contest,
ambasadorka energii
and
odnawialnej
renewable
w
energy
Rusłana, please join us.
ambassador in
Giles
Ukraine. Please join us.
Dixon,
Giles Dixon, CEO, Wind Europe.
Giles,
Please join us.
Rasmus Ergoen,
Rasmus
Orsted.
Erbe, Orsted,
Maria Andrzejewska, United
Maria
Nations
Andrzejewska,
Environment
United
Program.
Nations Environment Program, and Marcin
autor
Popkiewicz,
książek,
author of
dziennikarz,
books,
autor
journalist,
takich książek jak Świat na
and other books
rozdrożu,
like World on the Crossroads, Science on Climate, and the book you have a chance to read about understanding energy transition.
Jeszcze jakbym mogła prosić o mikrofon. Czy możemy prosić o jeszcze jeden?
Could we have one more mic, please?
Tak. Wojna w Ukrainie
War in Ukraine has showed us how fragile the energy sector is, how fragile our energy security is. Today we will focus whether environmental protection goes hand in hand with energy security. But first I'd like to start from Ruslana. She does not have a mic yet, so if we could have the
Yes,
mic.
you can stand up if you want to do the speech. So Rusłana, please begin the session with your speech.
Dzień dobry Państwu. Jestem z
Good
Lwowa,
afternoon.
wszystko
I'm
rozumiem.
from Lviv. I understand you're Polish.
Слава Україні.
Slava Ukrainie.
It's a very unique and dangerous moment when I have no idea how many people will be killed in Ukraine when we will make this conference for this time. It's a very difficult time personally for me to use my mobile because I don't want to know the bad news that somebody I know very well, my friend, will be killed. It's really dangerous, believe me. Maybe I bring the messages you heard about it for many, many times. Maybe nothing new from the messages I bring and tell right now. Maybe everybody agree with these messages. But I need to say it again and again, not just repeat it, not just remind it, but now, my friend, I know Mr. Dixon Giles for many, many years, and I'm so thank you. You explained me a lot of great things, and Andrew Konechnikov Galina. So we are really team, and I know personally a lot of people here. But now when I speak about clean energy and renewable energy, I know it's not just understanding for more. No, I feel it. It's a big difference. I'm Ruslana from Ukraine, and everything I do is just to stop this terrible war. Russia war, Putin's war, and bring the peace. That is why my personal key and choose clean energy. Now I feel it as an independent energy, energy for peace, energy for freedom. I'm fighting for independence and freedom of my country. It's only one task for me personally, to save my country, to save Ukraine, and stop this terrible war as soon as possible. And I'm using the messages about clean energy as a provider, as an ambassador in renewable energy. Not just explain, but it's only one way, only one plan, right plan for all of us. Not for future, for tomorrow, but today, for now. Ukraine. Look, we unite the people, we unite the world, we bring a peace. It's our idea of Ukraine, to bring a peace for Europe, for the world, and unite people, unite the hearts. Ukraine chose independent energy. Now we are part of the Europe energy system. It happened. Ukraine is Europe. We are part of Europe. No Russia. No USSR. The message about Ukraine, we bring the energy for peace. And we are ready to create the clean energy, to be a hub of 100 renewable energy. We're ready to make this energy for Europe together with Europe. The Russia. The Russia brings us a really old world. Terror, chantage, propaganda, aggression. Russia brings the war. No peace. For all of us, not just for Ukraine. This is the war against civilization, against the world, against Europe, against humanity. It's the first time when Putin makes the energy as a weapon. Russia, missiles, rockets, attack and occupied Chernobyl and Energodar. Ukraine nuclear power plant. For the first time ever, we can see that energy is weapons. About Europe. The message is not good because you are the next. And you feel it. You know it. Listen to Russia propaganda. For example, Vesti FM. Russia announced that Russia will burn Europe. But the problem is, and confused for the same time, that Europe pay for Russia energy. Even now, Europe buy Russia energy. For what? You pay for this war. That is why I ask you, stop Russia energy. Stop use Russia energy. Stop the war. Cancel Russia energy. And cancel the war. The only one right plan for all of us, for all people around the world, build a new world with a new mentality. Unite for one planet, one life, and one clean energy. Energy for peace. And win together. I believe that this is the moment to change our mind. The renewable energy 100 from this moment means 100 peaceful, 100 freedom, 100 independent. We need eco, energy, harmony for future, without any war around the energy. It saves our earth, air, water, amazing forest, and amazing people. About wind energy. I love wind energy so much. Personally, I performed on a wind turbine, and I make my music video. I first crazy singer who used the platform very high, over ground, in the sky, as a stage for music video. And it's very successful. People were surprised about that. So I have my dream to perform in Rotterdam with the biggest General Electric wind turbine, which is 12 megawatt, I think so. And I believe that people love wind energy. I provide it with my music. As a singer, the Eurovision World Music Awards winner, I perform a million times around the world, and I believe that art of energy, with the technologies, IT, smart, that the music on clean energy will bring a clean beat, clean sound for our hearts. I don't believe that the money will build a bright future. But I believe that we'll make right choice by our hearts. 100 clean energy, renewable energy, wild energy, wind energy, energy for all of us. Слава Україні!
Rusłana, bardzo dziękuję za to przyjemne.
Thank you very much, Rusłana, for this very touching address.
Pana Marcina Popkiewicza, który jest
And I remembered the words of Marcin Popkiewicz, who said, you are either in favor of the environment or you are Putin's useful idiot. Yes, that was a couple of years ago. I wrote that in my book entitled How to Understand the Energy Transition. It was before the invasion on Ukraine. I didn't have to change much after the Russian invasion. I switched from conditional mode to statements of the past. So lobbying for fossil fuels in Poland can only be done by an idiot, sociopath, or Putin's agent. There was a triangle with optimization: Climate protection, well, okay, but if we want to have cheap energy and energy security, so we have to move the slider to one of these three directions. But everything tells us to shift away from fossil fuels. Climate protection, shift away from fossil fuels. Prices of energy, prices of fossil fuels, coal, oil, coal for households. Those prices are crazy. Energy security, it's obvious. We import most of our coal from Russia. It was really sad for me to look at people looking in their smartphones during Roxana's speech. We are in a historical moment. Russia lives off selling fossil fuels. For the last 100 years during the conflict, every day Russia makes $1 billion on fossil fuels, sold to mostly sold to Europe, to European countries. We support Putin with more funds than we support Ukraine. We cannot move away from fossil fuels immediately, but we have wasted a lot of years. The 10H rule, blocking wind power, blocking development of PV, blocking energy clusters. We could have done much, much more. But we still have politicians saying that, no, they will oppose the ban on sales of internal combustion engines in vehicles. They support Putin. It is a moment to shake them and to switch quickly to zero emission, zero carbon sources. Wind, PV, perhaps nuclear. I'm not a fan of nuclear, but it has its advantages and disadvantages. We have to electrify our electricity. We have some biomass, but it's not much. I'm moving too far forward. To answer your question, yes, we should move away from fossil fuels. I calculated some time ago the amount of money that we sent to Russia purchasing their coal, oil, and gas, and how big a part of the budget of the Russian Federation comes from fossil fuel sales, and how much is spent on the Russian army. And we are paying more to the Russian army than to the Polish army. So we need to have good change in that respect.
Chance that we can do the transition, and we need to speed up the transition. But we still do have procedures, policies that we need to change. Can you tell us what to do to speed up the wind energy? How to speed it up? Do you have a microphone? No. You don't. How to speed up the transition, and which countries are the role model when we talk about the policies and procedures?
Thank you very much, Dominika. Good morning, everybody. What an honor it is to be here and to have listened to Ruslana's amazing speech. Europe has transformed its energy policy and strategy in a very short space of time. Never before has energy policy moved so quickly. No more Russian energy imports from 2027 onwards. Massive acceleration of renewables in order to make up for that and in order to give Europe energy security and independence. And the really good thing is that these are not just aspirational statements or targets, but the European Union gets it that you only expand wind energy if you simplify the permitting rules and procedures. And so one of the central elements of Repower EU, the EU's new energy strategy, is precisely that: how to simplify permitting. There are going to be changes to EU law. The expansion of renewables will now be treated as a matter of overriding public interest. It's never been treated as that before. Every country will have to identify go-to areas. There will be shorter deadlines for giving permits to new wind farms, both onshore and offshore. There's a new principle of positive silence, that if a permitting authority has not said anything by its deadline, you assume that they agree with the permit. This is all radical, but it's necessary. And it's so good to see also, this is not just the European Union, it is national governments making these changes as well. Let me share one example of that with you. 2 weeks after the 24th of February, Mario Draghi was about to chair his weekly meeting of the Council of Ministers. As you all know, those weekly meetings of Council of Ministers are really important in any capital. And he learned the evening before the meeting that his culture minister had blocked 400 megawatts of onshore wind farms because those onshore wind farms were just a few kilometers away from historical churches. Now, we all love historical churches. We all love churches. But Draghi said, hold on, this is not right. I need to be building more wind farms, not blocking them simply because they may be slightly close to these historical churches. So he went to the cabinet meeting and he said to the culture minister, you are blocking 400 megawatts of wind farms. Does everybody else around this table agree that we should unblock them? And everybody nodded. And so 400 megawatts of wind farms were duly approved in one single meeting. And that is the new political dynamic we're seeing in every country. Germany, for the last few years, has been building only 1.5 gigawatts of new onshore wind every year. Their new government is now saying from 2025 onwards, we will build 10 gigawatts of onshore wind every year. And they are changing their rules so that there is a more healthy balance between the vital public policy interests of expanding wind energy and the vital public policy interests of protecting biodiversity. So things are moving. There are good examples in nearly every country in Europe now of permitting rules and procedures being simplified. And it's so good to come here today and to hear what seems to be the very encouraging news, the announcements from Anna Moskva this morning on the softening of the 10H rule here in Poland. The great thing is you can learn from every country around Europe, and that's something else the European Union has now given us. Alongside these legal changes to the Renewables Directive and what it says on permitting, there are 8 pages of detailed recommendations from the European Commission to all member states on how to simplify their permitting rules and procedures, and there are 45 pages of good practice across all the different aspects of permitting. Proximity to military radar, can you deploy the most up-to-date technology, or are you stuck with the technology that was in the original permit application? All of those nitty-gritty issues, there is good practice somewhere. And these 45 pages from the Commission detail all of that, and they say to the member states, look at each other, you all have something to learn from each other, go out there, simplify your permitting, and let's build out wind energy.
How simplify? How to simplify those permissions?
You look at your existing rules, and you say, what barriers do I have? Best example, we all know it in this country. 10H, for example, and therefore you simplify it. And you allow local municipalities to say, actually, we want that wind farm, so we won't apply 10H. You allow wind farm developers, when they build the wind farm, to deploy the most up-to-date technology, so that they're not stuck with the old technology that they might have written into their original permit application. That's another change that's going through with these new proposals today from Anna Moskva. You do something about the distance that wind farms have to be located away from military radar installations. Even France, which hasn't done very well on permitting for many years now, last week the military said, okay, it's not going to be 70 kilometers anymore, it's going to be 30 kilometers. These sort of small, simple, nitty-gritty changes are what are happening.
Thank you. Pani Mario, jak z Pani perspektywy zmieniło się postrzeganie kryzysu klimatycznego?
How has the perception of the climate crisis changed from your point of view after the start of the war in Ukraine? Thank you very much for the invitation. It is indeed a great honor to be here. And we spoke with Marcin some time ago that it's really hard to it's really great to participate in events that really bring something good, that bring about some change. So we need to strengthen this sector to make it the leading sector in energy generation. It is my feeling, and with regard to what Rusłana has said and what we've heard, often we focus on fossil fuels. Marcin has beautifully said about the relationship with Russia. Yes, the war has shaken us up and it has made us aware of how much we are dependent on fossil fuels. This key factor resulting in the climate crisis. And it is sometimes really difficult to express. I do not really know how to express, on the one hand, it's not really positive, because war is something very negative, but it has made us aware and has accelerated our thinking in a way that we should have done much, much earlier. We were aware of that much earlier, but it often happens not only in political life, but in our daily lives, that being aware of what we should do, we do not always do it, and we postpone it, we procrastinate. Fossil fuels, energy generation, this is this direct effect, but I would like to draw your attention to something that is also very important for your industry. The relationship with ecosystems, with biodiversity, because war is killing people, it is physical and mental destruction of human beings, but it is also destruction of biosystems, killing animals, destroying nature sites and biodiversity that without which we cannot exist on this planet. And if we don't pay enough attention not only to protecting those natural values, but also restoring them, we will not survive. This is one of the components or one areas that we need to think more about. There are many relationships between those areas and the war in Ukraine, but from my point of view, the climate crisis, fossil fuels, biodiversity, but also what we are talking about on a daily basis, the danger of food shortages. These are the threats that are directly related to the war in Ukraine. But focusing on fossil fuels and how change is necessary in terms of the way we generate energy, and we need to combine all these components not only to generate green electricity, but we need to have low emission or zero emission heat generation as well, and we need to shift towards new industries that are based on green energy. So we need to transform our industry towards green energy. Several days ago, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the United Nations Environmental Programme. The celebrations were held in Stockholm because 50 years ago, the Stockholm Conference took place when this most important environmental agency of the United Nations was established. And we spoke about the fact that we do have the technology, we know what has to be changed, but we need to push forward in a very dynamic manner. And many good examples were given, especially in Sweden. They are taking place in Sweden. I don't know examples from other countries, but a lot has been said about steel manufacturing based on green hydrogen. And I think this is a great example of what can follow the development of your sector, the energy, green energy generation sector, how much we can change thanks to that in the entire scope of economic operations.
We wouldn't have climate change if we didn't have polluters. And I mean, I mentioned polluters because Ørsted went through being the least sustainable company to the most sustainable company in a very short period. So what's the recipe for this transition, especially for post-coal regions like we have here?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the question, and I'm going to spare you for the Ørsted transformation story, the long version, which has been shared many times before. But what I think, what I will say is that the way I always talk about our journey is that we didn't see anything that was not evident to everyone. We didn't have a crystal ball or anything. We basically looked at the same data as everyone else. And then some very bright people before me took 1, 2, maybe 2.5 very bold strategic decisions. And then it was about execution, 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 execution. Because that is also very much what we see right now, that the decisions are not difficult. If you really go in the helicopter, the decisions, we've been hearing it all day today, that I'm not saying that they are not complex, I'm not saying that there are not sort of many elements to it, but if you look at the core of the decisions that we are facing right now in the green transition, they are not very difficult decisions. So I think for the sort of the way I would transform our small sort of journey into the bigger picture right now is by saying that it's really just about getting it done now and all realizing the urgency. What I will then also say about the transformation story is, and it's gonna sort of dilute the Ørsted story a little bit, but I do that deliberately. That is that it was a bit easier for us in the sense, and also for offshore wind 10-15 years ago, in the sense that we basically only had one challenge, and that was to bring down cost, right? That was what needed to take place. You've all seen, I'm sure, the slides with the wind turbines that are getting bigger and bigger, and the whole industrialization of offshore wind. But the challenge we have in front of us and the transformation we have to do now as an industry, I still stand by my comment of saying that it's basically just about getting it done. But it's a different toolbox that we now have to use. And it's very much a toolbox around collaboration between developers, supply chain, and also policymakers, and also across borders. And we didn't have to sort of, we didn't need to do the same for us early on. We could sort of go more solo, if you know what I mean, together with our sort of closest peers in the industry. But now it's about hybrid solutions. It's about system integrated solutions. It's about coexistence at sea. It's sort of, when you go to net zero by 2050, it's just a bigger puzzle, and therefore also a bigger toolbox. So therefore, if I were to say one thing, that would be increased, open, transparent collaboration and dialogue. I'm sure there is enough for everyone. So let's just start getting it done.
Panie Marcinie, o zmianach klimatu mówimy...
Marcin, we've been talking about climate change for quite a lot of time. We've been declaring change for many years, but I have the impression that only when the war started did we took a more serious approach to it. We are in the process of energy transition, but how to understand energy transition? On the cover it says that we're in a depression. Why are we depressed, do you think? What Maria mentioned, that we have an optimistic view because something's happening. Scientists have talked about it, they've warned about you, they wrote these huge books and reports, and politicians did what they did. Especially from the point of view of our country, it's very toxic. We know what must be done with climate change. We know this is an issue as a world, as scientists. But when you heard some Polish politicians, we had the impression that this is like they come from a different world. They would say that we have coal for 200 years, nobody will stop us from burning it. And now they're telling people to collect brushwood, really, But I will not be malicious here. That's my second nature. But you're ready for that, so go on. All right. Well, climate change, from the point of view of energy transition, is a huge challenge because the world is built on fossil fuels. 85% of fuel used around the world are fossil fuels, chemical energy carriers, available when you want it. You have fuel in your tank, you have coal on demand, and replacing them is not easy. And there are huge interest groups around this business. The status quo is very large, has many supporters. And in Poland, the energy sector is the largest supporter of the political class. There are all these nice jobs, energy, financial transfers, etc. You know how politics work. And then we have this creative disruption. We depart from fossil fuels. We are developing technology. And this disruptive solution will say that it's okay, the fossil fuels are a thing of the past. You have to depart from them very quickly. Over 80% of fossil fuel resources must stay underground. But this is in balance sheet books of Aramco and other corporations. 90% of these resources should stay underground, and they are defending from that. Politicians are defending from change. Especially in Poland, we can see that Poland is coal land. We are the country that vetoed all kinds of environmental policies. We are a special country, the only country putting the monkey in the wrench in the works. In Austria and other parts of Germany, there's also an attained age rule, but they have special planning, really. So the houses are here, but they're not there. In Poland, nothing works, really. We have houses spread around the country. So you cannot build onshore wind anywhere. We could talk about Polish politics, how it was against disruptive or creative disruption, because something new should come, and people resist change. And it's very frustrating to have watching this in Poland. We've talked about this with Maria. I'm sure it must have been frustrating for the 10-age rule. That they're building pitfalls on your path, because you are disruptive for the huge status quo who like the monopoly on fossil fuels. Monopolies like to stay. We had no innovators in corporations, or like Elon Musk or an Ørsted, who like to perform energy transition. They had political tax. They want to make a lot of money every month. But there's this creative disruption that destroys their business. I could go for a long time. The depression. Well, now looking at coal land, that Poland is like a coal land, leads to depression. Looking how emissions are growing around the world, we are forced to suffer climate change. It will be very serious. We are trying to limit the bad results, really. Looking at the energy transition in Poland, how it's not functioning, how decision makers are stopping the creative disruption, you can really get depressed, really, to sum it up. Looking at the broader view, what we're doing with the environment, how we treat energy efficient. We talk about renewables, but we forget that in life we don't need gigajoules or kilowatt hours. We just want to have a comfortable life, to have thermal comfort in our house, to go to get a beer, the beer to be cold, and to have a fridge. Energy efficiency is not functioning well, or anything we do about it. It's dramatic. Our hopes are like vampires, energy vampires. To have a FLIR camera around Poland, everything is bright red. It's not any better in Ukraine. People open up their windows and they pull the radiators, heat, and they waste energy. We need energy transition. so as not to have too many turbines. We don't need to have 100 and something kilowatt hours. We need to have energy efficient homes, passive homes. We need to have right mechanical ventilation, heat pumps, electrification, energy mobility. We're replacing 20-something million cars into fuel-powered into energy-powered cars. We should perform greater changes to save electricity. There are some limits of growth, which are not only related to energy, availability of metals and other minerals. We have to be very cautious about this, ensuring the right recycling of our installations, the circular economy, protecting biodiversity. We cannot industrialize everything, so we need to have a systemic approach, and it's a huge challenge. And not many politicians think about it like that. Are there any optimistic aspects in the book, or will you depress us? Are there any optimistic chapters? Well, the book is quite optimistic, really, because we can see that we can do it, that it's possible to depart from fossil fuels, and the plan will function as far as numbers are concerned, facts and figures. I built a simulator of the energy system, hour by hour. We analyze supply and demand, related to cars, to houses, etc. And we have the real energy generation in Poland, hour by hour, from wind, PV, and how it works. Sometimes we have a surplus, we don't have enough electricity. We have renewables, how many we need, what's the role of gas, do we need to have natural gas, maybe biomethane should be used, will we have enough biomethane, etc. Maybe hydrogen, from green hydrogen. So, in the book, we take into account other issues, other technologies, like heat storage, fundamental. That's very cheap, especially in the winter. We can see we have a lot of electricity from sun in the summer, and a lot, but not enough from wind. How these things can coexist, wind and solar. So I'm discussing these issues in the book. Heat storage for a few days will be enough. An hour by hour we have this simulator. One of the heads I wear are part of an institution that coordinates some European programs, very innovative. It gives me the power, showing us how cool things Polish engineers can come up with. So it's possible. I'm showing you how it can function. The simulator is available at the NCBR website. There's a link. There's an Excel sheet you can play around with, and 2 months' time there will be an app. So we can simulate the function of the Polish industry with nuclear power, wind energy, solar energy, impact of dynamic tariffs. You can play around with the sliders, and it will function. It can function with the rational assumptions. Now, with an optimistic point of view, there will be some infrastructural things to do, but most of the supply chain will come from Poland. It's about Polish jobs. So we're not only protecting the environment, we're not only doing away with oil from Putin, where he can put his gas pipe, but we are using Polish companies, Polish jobs. So this is a huge program, economic program, a huge developmental leap for the next 25 years. You have to be crazy not to do it. I'm just smiling to Polish politicians.
Yeah. I would like to supplement with maybe a tad more optimistic view when it comes to offshore wind, if that is okay. I'm not in any way undermining or second-guessing the fact that there is a burning platform. Fully agree. And also the urgency, fully agree. But I think it is also just important to take a step back and realize how fast Poland has actually moved on offshore wind in the last 3-4 years. And the reason that has been the case is also that the fundamentals for offshore wind in Poland are excellent. And what you see now is a lot of names up there, including us, that basically international companies who would now very much like to come to Poland and also share our experiences, and together with the Polish industry, very fast ramp up an offshore wind industry here in Poland. And I think it's just important when I compare Poland to other markets in Europe that to remember these fundamentals. Take the Polish supply chain. It has been an integral part of the offshore wind supply chain in Europe for a very long time. So I think what is very important is that a framework is set up also for future allocation of seabed leases that allows the experience to also travel into Poland, that allows for joint ventures. We have two joint ventures, one with PG and one with CPAC, that we are incredibly pleased about, both of them. But also, that also goes for some of our colleagues across Europe. So basically having a framework that allows experience to travel in and also recognizes experience from other countries, UK as an example. So I think if you put that framework in place and then allow for these JVs to really flourish, then I think we actually do have a very big opportunity. And we also have some very bold and forward-leaning Polish companies. Look at the strategies of, for instance, PG and CPAC as examples. So I don't have this feeling that people are leaning back. I actually have a feeling that people are very much leaning in, but there is certainly much more to be done.
Giles, do you compare Polish market to the other markets, and what are the conclusions?
I'd like to endorse what Rasmus has just said first of all. Every country in Europe that has done offshore wind so far has done it on the basis of partnerships. They've brought in the experience, the skills, the know-how from other countries, from other companies. Every country. Take the UK, which is the leader in Europe in offshore wind. It's been your company, Vattenfall, RWE, Equinor, and so on, that have built those offshore wind farms. And a vibrant UK supply chain has developed on the back of that. But it's only developed because the partnerships were there in the first place and the outside expertise was able to come in. Poland has another advantage, which is the huge availability of EU funds. Now, of course, the resilience and recovery money is going to be released as and when Poland meets the milestones that have been agreed. You know, it's huge money, 24 billion euros of grants, 12 billion euros of loans, and significant percentages of those have to be spent on clean energy. Already there are the available sources from the Modernization Fund, the Innovation Fund, of course the structural funds can play a role as well. And the EU really wants to work with you to help you make the most of these funds that are available, finance that's available. There's a third thing that is so important, which is a common challenge we're seeing in every country that's doing offshore wind, and that is workforce and skills. We have today around 80,000 people across Europe working in offshore wind. By 2030, that number needs to be 200,000 if we're going to meet the targets that different national governments have now set for themselves. Recruiting those additional workers is already a challenge, as I am sure you would testify, Rasmus, and training those workers is a challenge. We are beginning to invest. This is where the just transition comes in from the wind industry now in the retraining and the reskilling of coal miners. It takes us 3 months only to train a coal miner to be somebody who can work in a wind farm. Of course, they have good technical skills already and they're used to working in extreme physical conditions. And we now have a program up and running with 2 training centers in Romania that are actively doing this, and we dearly want to set up something similar in Poland.
Giles, can you pass the microphone to Ruswana, because I would like to ask her a question. Ruswana, what was the approach to renewables before war in Ukraine? What was the approach to renewables energy in Ukraine before war?
Now Ukraine announced that we are going 100 renewable. So Zelensky says it. And it's a big change for all of us. Before this war, we, and Andrei Konechnikov can add something about that. We provide renewable energy for a big and long way. Explain how it's important, when we need to be energy independent, what it means. But we used, and we, Ukraine, I mean, was as a transit for Russia gas, it was our problem. That is why we stop it. And only one message I have for renewable energy. So this is the really energy for independence, believe me. Now Ukraine are not just ready, but we decided go 100 renewable. We open for innovation, for investors. We open for big renewable energy project. We want it, we need it to save our country.
Thank you, Ruswana. Giles, Rasmus, I wanted to ask you both about Baltic Sea. Is it an undiscovered hub that will play the strategic role right now when we talk about energy security in Europe?
Should I start? Yes, it's a huge opportunity. If you just look at the Baltic Sea region, just look at the sort of geography, I think, take Denmark and Poland, who is basically the southern part of the Baltic Sea region, and then think about that and how that can serve as a hub for further developments the further you basically go up. And what we have seen in other markets across the world, take US as an example, is that if you get the hub thinking right from the beginning, you can make some very significant advances to your supply chain, and also to mitigate some of the facts that I talked about before about the struggles that the supply chain have with scale. Because if you want to put a turbine factory 5 different places in 5 different countries, you're not going to make it necessarily. So therefore, I genuinely believe that there is significant potential in the Baltic Sea region, but also that Poland has an additional incentive and a real possibility to be the anchor point of those developments that would then go further up in the Baltic Sea region to unleash the more than 80 gigawatt potential of offshore wind.
Giles.
Yes, the Baltic has great potential. The geography is perfect. The seabed conditions, the wind conditions, all 8 countries around the Baltic Sea now recognize this. Many good things have already happened. There are already lots of offshore wind farms in the Baltic Sea. Let us not forget that. Not yet in every country, but certainly Germany, Denmark. Crucial in all of this is the collaboration between the 8 countries around the Baltic Sea. Hats off to Poland when Poland summoned the 7 other governments to Szczecin in the autumn of 2019 and signed that Baltic offshore wind cooperation agreement. That is a really good basis for taking things forward, as you said earlier, Rasmus. The Baltic actually has Europe's only, in fact, the world's only hybrid offshore wind farm where there are grid connections to 2 countries already, namely Kriegers Flak with a connection to Germany and to Denmark. And now the Swedes have belatedly recognized they want to have a connection as well, which is great. Of course, Latvia and Estonia are developing together the Elwind offshore wind farm. And as you say, these sort of projects, Rasmus, are going to be key. We know that Lithuania is very interested in developing a project jointly with Poland. And another advantage that the Baltic Sea has is that you have a good existing network of interconnectors and many more interconnectors between countries around the Baltic that are going to be built. And these interconnectors can serve as hubs into which the offshore wind farms can connect. And of course, this is good because it saves space, it saves money, and it improves energy flows between countries around the Baltic.
Pani Mario, Panie Marcinie, usłyszeliśmy same superlatywy na temat naszego Bałtyku.
Marcin, we have heard only superb things about the Baltic Sea and about its potential, and we haven't discovered it yet. Maria? Yes, indeed. This business is only starting, is only emerging, but it's really great that there are so many companies interested in it, and it's great to see such huge potential. But let me come back to biodiversity, because I will focus on that, but this is very important. Investing and building wind turbines, be it onshore or offshore. All companies are focusing on various assessments, and they have to report on the way they interfere with the environment and with the local communities. So it's not only about having good reports and concluding that we are trying to destroy as little as possible, but we need to restore and support the restoration of biodiversity in neighboring areas, or not only in neighboring areas. We need to focus on restoring ecosystems. It is not just about minimizing the negative impact, but this negative impact, of course, has to be minimized, and the investment process has to be carried out in the smartest way possible. But we need to remember that we have to restore what we have already destroyed. And it is particularly the responsibility of companies with tens of years of history, because they were able to operate for many years without being concerned, without bothering whether their products have any environmental consequences or not. But now EU regulations force these companies to do that. But there is a lot of other conditions. We are talking about non-financial reporting that will apply to all companies. But that's not only that. Because we will all have an indication, we need to talk about the survival of mankind. Several days ago in Stockholm, we discussed that this decade will have key importance on the future of mankind. Not only the future of our planet, the future of mankind, of us all. Marcin can talk more about those planetary boundaries that have been broken and the capacities that have been exceeded. We cannot reverse that, but we can develop wind power, we can develop renewables as such, and this should be dramatically accelerated. And I fully subscribe to what Giles and Erasmus have said. But you need to remember about biodiversity.
I could not agree more about the focus on biodiversity. I'm almost embarrassed that I didn't bring it up myself. So, and I would like to share two reflections. One is that if you look at Ørsted first, yes, we are the world's most sustainable energy company, and yes, we do have a target to make all our projects we do by 2030 net biodiversity positive. But I think my point is that other companies will have that as well. And basically the best way of really truly making a difference on biodiversity was going to be a very significant topic going forward. It's one of the 5 biggest trends we see that will be a bottleneck for offshore in the next 20 years. And that is basically by making tender criteria. When you put out the offshore wind farm, where you basically force the developers to invest, truly invest, in biodiversity measures. We just saw it in the Netherlands a month ago, where we and many other colleagues in the industry competed to get a pretty big offshore wind farm, where the key competitive differentiator on that tender was ecological innovation. Not price, ecological innovation. And what then happened was that all of us unleashed our entire sort of innovative capabilities in our organizations to really work with the industry and with NGOs, etc., to come up with the right solutions. And that is also what I talked about before, about bringing in international experience to Poland. And it's exactly stuff like that that not only we, but also many of our colleagues can bring to the table. Again, based on the right regulatory framework.
Thank you very much. Dziękuję bardzo za ten panel, Rusłana.
Thank you very much for this panel, Rusłana, Giles, Rasmus, Maria, Marcin. Thank you all very much. And let me now invite you to the premiere, to the launch of the report, Polish Offshore Wind Power 4.0. This premiere will take place just next door in the media zone. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I have one very important question for you. You send us, I'm from the stage group. You send us your rider, and there is some special microphone. Sure, Emma, next time.
For what? For tomorrow?
Do you need this microphone? Or you can use our Sure. Like this? Like this one? Like this one. So